Genesis text first, make a few comments on this portion, and then we'll come back to really focus on Malachi. And Genesis 24, and our reading starts in, make sure I have it right, 25:19. And notice that 25:19, this is important, notice that 25:19 opens with, these are the generations. That's important because the whole book of Genesis is laid out with 10 of these. These are the generations. So it's divided into segments. So here in verse 19, you'll notice in Hebrew it opens up the Ele Toldot. So these are the generations, and each of these segments, each of these 10 in Genesis is a new section, a new heading, new header. And it's interesting because the word Toledot comes from the idea of giving birth, Yalad, to give birth. And so the noun form, Toledot, is the idea of generations or descendants. Again, with this idea that there is a promised seed. Okay, so we're thinking in terms of a promised seed that is coming. Okay, so each of these 10 sections divide up the book of Breshit as a way of saying this is about the coming one, this coming seed. Ele Toledot, these are the generations. Okay, so right up front, the whole book is structured around this idea of seed or descendant. So that we're looking for this one who is coming. Now, look at this. It says this. So I want to read down a little bit here and kind of look at a few things. First of all, I want you to notice that God speaks to Rivka in the womb, as these children are in the womb, and tells her prophetically that, look what he says in verse 23. And the Lord said to her, now this is, before these children are born, that's important theologically. Before these children are born, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, and here it is, here's the key, and the older shall serve the younger. So now we're going to have Jacob and Esau, and Esau is going to be Edom, become the Edomites, and yet God is going to choose sovereignly to work through Yaakov and not through Esau as much. The promised seed will not come through Esau, the older. Remember what we've said all the way through the book of Breshit. God is, in a sense, not working with the eldest, but working with maybe the one that's next or the one that's next in the line. So it's not, God is saying, look, I'm not bound by the culture to say, just because the firstborn is in your culture important, don't think that I'm going to be hemmed in by that. Just when you think that it's this firstborn, it's not going to be that firstborn. In fact, by the time we get to the second king, you know, he's looking at Eliab and he says, oh, Eliab, he's very tall, he's the one. And God says, no, it's not Eliab, it's David. He's way down the line. He's got to be brought in from the sheep, tending the sheep. So you kind of see this going through this idea that I will not be hemmed in by the culture that says the firstborn has to be the next one in succession, the next one that the blessing is poured through. So Toledot kind of signals for us, Ele Toledot, this is the generations. And then he gives this prophecy to Rivka, and we don't have any indication per se that Rivka shares this with her husband Yitzhak. Okay, so she knows that the older is going to serve the younger. Okay, so Esau is not going to be the one that everything is poured through, but it will be Yaakov, it will be Jacob. So now we're going to watch the line of Jacob, and we're going to be cognizant of what's going on there. Now, look at verse 29 of chapter 25. So once when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field and was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, let me eat some of that red stew, for I'm exhausted. Jacob said, sell me your birthright now. And Esau said, I'm about to die. Of what use is the birthright to me? Jacob said, swear to me now. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went away. Thus Esau despised his birthright. By the way, very seldom do you get that many verbs in Hebrew back to back. I mean, you have ate, drank, rose, went up, got up. It's like to have that many verbs back to back, a very, very quick action.
Action-packed drama.
It's just very, very moving action, okay? Very seldom you have that many verbs back to back on top of each other. So it's fascinating here that Yaakov, tricks in a sense, not tricks, but plays on the hunger of Esau and manipulates him, so to speak, for the birthright. Which, here's another one of those things that we see throughout the book of Genesis. The patriarchs are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. They have absolute feet of clay. And yet, in all of that, God still blesses them. He still blesses them. They get more wealth. They get more stuff. And you'd think that, God would punish, but there's a bigger plan going on here. The bigger plan is the promised seed. By the way, that's the good news. Our apostolic text ended with euangelion, the good news. Isaiah 52:7 says, here is good news. Your God reigns. That is the good news. That's the good news, is that God reigns. And oh, by the way, he's sending a redeemer. These are the generations. Wake up. This is the one coming. And then it's not going to be Esau, it's going to be Yaakov. He's telegraphing that he knows who the promised seed is. I can tell you, while these kids are in utero, which one I'm going to choose. I'm going to tell you which one is going to be the promised one. It's not going to be him, it's going to be him. And this is before they're even born, so you'll know that this is a sovereign choice of God. And then what happens? You have Esau deceiving his brother. Okay? Now, turn the page. On chapter 26. And here again, we have verse 6. Here again, the patriarch, Isaac, Yitzhak. What does he do? He does exactly what he saw his father do twice. It's like, as Yogi Berra said, it's deja vu all over again. It's like, in other words, he saw Abraham twice pass his wife off as his sister. And now Isaac does exactly the same thing. Even though it was kind of true for Abraham. You could make a small case for Abraham that he was half-sister, right? It was half-sister at least. But, kind of half a lie is still kind of a lie. Kind of.
But that wasn't true.
But with Isaac, he says, she's my sister. He says, basically, look, you're good looking. Here's what's going to happen. Being you're so good looking, all the guys there are going to want you, but the king's going to really want you. And that was working. Everything was working until the text says that he saw, and that they translate it different ways, your translations, that the king saw Isaac, Yitzhak, and Rivka, and they are, in the text, it's built on the word for Yitzhak. They're laughing, which is kind of a euphemism for they're having relations. They're doing something. Some of your texts say caressing. Some of your texts say fondling. Okay, fine. I'm going to leave it there. This is a family show. So Bottom line is this, the king figures out that whatever these two are doing, if they're brother and sister, this is really messed up.
Yeah.
So, bottom line is, they ain't brother and sister. Okay? So he's like, hey, why didn't you tell me she was your wife? And then what happens? He gets blessed. He gets his socks blessed off. Look what happens here. Let's read it. It says, verse 14, he had possessions of flocks and herds and many servants, so that the Philistines envied him. Okay? Yeah.
On top of that, he gets protection for his life because the king puts out, you don't touch this.
Yeah,
and
never
that.
touch this guy again. Leave him alone.
If something happens to him, it will happen to you.
Right.
So now everybody's like,
Everybody hands off this guy. Leave him alone. Give him his wife back and leave him alone. Yeah.
You know, it's amazing how wonderful our God is, that he could bring forth our Redeemer, who has a lineage of murderers, adulterers, lying, all kinds of bad things, and yet he is the Savior of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Yeah, I mean, when you look at this, you look at the patriarchs, and you think to yourself, this is dysfunctionality on steroids. These people are dysfunctional. Absolutely dysfunctional. And oh, by the way, every one of us,
pretty dysfunctional.
dysfunctional. All of us have a level of dysfunctionality.
That's right.
There's some, even if it's low end 2 or 3, moving up to 9 or 10. I mean, you look at these patriarchs, Abraham. By the way, here's a good point to bring out for parents and for grandparents. Now that I'm one, is what your children see you do, they have a tendency to repeat. So here, Yitzhak sees his father twice pass his mother off as his sister, and he turns around and does the same thing. Children learn, they watch, and they see. Yeah.
Speaking of dysfunctional,
Yes.
yet it's still amazing again to think that God has chosen a dysfunctional group such as we are to take the gospel to the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a miracle. It's a miracle that anything ever gets done with the people God has to work with. Truly. Yeah. Absolutely. But look what I got to work with. All right. I'll make it do. I'll make it work. Somehow, the sovereignty of God, that's the beauty of the sovereignty of God, is that he makes do with what he has. He's able to do it. That's his sovereignty and the power of God. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
So was Esau actually alive when Abraham passed off his sister or his wife and sister, or was that something that you learned about through your story?
Oh, I mean, Yitzhak was alive. Well, I think he was alive when that happened. I think he was alive when that happened. I don't know.
The impression was born. I think that was a lot earlier.
Oh, okay. I have to go back and look then. Okay, good question. I hadn't thought about that. Bottom line is, I'm sure the narratives have gotten around.
Yeah.
I'm sure his mom had some stories to tell him. They're not going to believe what your father did.
Your father did.
You know, later on, like twice, not once, but twice. You know, I passed me off for, his sister. I mean, I have a feeling the narrative got around. Even if he wasn't born yet, I'm sure that somebody in the family said, "You're not going to believe your father." Either the mother or somebody had to tell him. I'm sure. Somebody. Well, irony is that he does the same thing.
Yeah.
It's ironic, if nothing else.
He obviously got that from him.
Huh?
How did Moshe know to write it down?
Yeah, Moshe knew to write it down.
Right.
He knew it had passed on orally, and so the story should pass down. All right. Here's another one. You have the blessing of Isaac. Jacob wants to bless Isaac and Esau. Jacob wants to bless Esau. Excuse me, Yitzhak, Isaac wants to bless Esau. So he tells him, all right, go out and hunt some game, come back, and I'll do the blessing. In the meantime, Rivka and Yaakov come up with a plan that they are going to not only have they already taken the birthright, now they're going to take the blessing. So they dress dress him up, Yaakov, they dress him up with Esau's clothes so that he smells like and feels like Esau. Esau goes out and he hunts. And Yaakov goes in, and his father, we're told, he can't see very well. So he says, Isaac does, he says, you have the voice of Yaakov, but you smell like Esau. I'm confused. See, one of the things that doesn't change over time, one of the things that does not change over time is your voice. You could get older, and for the most part, your voice patterns and your voice sound doesn't change that much. So he can't see, so he's having to rely upon smell, he's having to rely upon sound. And I have a suspicion, I can't prove it, that he kind of knows. He kind of knows. Because he says, you sound like Isaac. No, Jacob. You sound like Jacob. And here's why I think he knows. Look at the text. I'm going to show you something. Look at what he asks. You remember he sends Esau. He has Esau there. He sends him out to hunt. And he's surprised that Esau has come back so soon. Okay, that's the first thing that's a little tip off. But here's the question he asks. Go and look at verse let's see here. Yeah, he says in verse 18, yeah. So he went to his father and said, my father. He said, here am I. And then he says this, who are you, my son? All right. Now, who is Isaac expecting? Esau. Okay. So let me suggest to you that idiomatically in Hebrew, you can ask somebody, who are you? And by asking them, who are you, you can be doing one of two things. You can ask somebody, who are you? That is, what is your identity? And I'm asking for your name. I can also idiomatically say, who are you? And by that I mean, how did things go? You see this in the book of Ruth, when Ruth comes back to Naomi after spending the night on the threshing floor. Ruth and Naomi know each other. Naomi says to Ruth, who are you? She doesn't say, I am Ruth, your daughter-in-law. She says, oh, here's how things went at the threshing floor. So who are you can idiomatically be asked of somebody who already knows you, how did things go? So now hear this question. Hear it this way. So how did things go? I am Esau, your firstborn. Huh? Of course you're Esau, my firstborn. That's who was coming back to see me. I'm not asking you who you are. I'm asking, how did things go? And that right there was a tip-off to Yitzhak that this is not the person. And then he later on says, you have the voice of Isaac. Jacob. Keep getting these guys mixed up. You have the voice of Jacob.
He also didn't have his hands look the same either.
Yeah, so the hands are not quite the same. Esau's a hairy guy.
So he knew who he was.
Yeah, I think he knew who he was. I think that tip off at the front end, and then him saying, I know that this is the voice of Yaakov, is kind of his way of saying, I got this figured out, but I'm going to go ahead with it anyway.
Yeah, because I'm sure you remember the blessing or the prophecy from earlier.
No, well, we don't know if he knows the prophecy given to Rivka. It's not told to us that she said to him what was said.
Have you ever known a wife to be silent about something like that?
Oh, sure.
Dan.
Come on. Hold on.
He didn't ask him one time. He asked him like 3 or 4 times.
I just asked you, you know.
Look, I'm going to tell you this. Oh, yeah, so to answer your question, people can say what they want to say, but every guy has things that they've hid from their wife, and every wife has things they've hid from their husband at some point. In any length of marriage, it happens. Now, that's not to say that some things don't get eventually found out, but things get hidden. All right, now I want to. Oh, Mike? What were you saying? Go ahead.
Well, I believe that they said something about him putting on goat skin on his forearms as well, so that when Jacob touched him.
Right, they do put the skins on his forearms so that when Jacob reaches out. there's both the feel and the smell. But I suspicion, I can't prove it, I suspicion that Yitzhak is not fooled as much as we think he was.
Unless he's a werewolf, I've never seen something with enough hair to be a goat.
Yeah, so it's, yeah. I think they're trying to get the smell thing going, and that's very interesting. All right, any questions about this portion of the text? A lot of stuff here. I want to really move to 1 Kings because here's where we also connect. Yeah.
Going back to Abram and Yitzhak, Abram said that those two things in chapter 12 and chapter 20 before the birth of Isaac.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was probably told to him.
Probably told you. Yeah.
Back when Esau comes back to Yitzhak and says, "I'm dying, give me some of your food." Is there any play in those words going on there? Because I mean, if I'm alive enough to say, "Give me some food,"
Yeah.
and I'm at home, I'm probably alive enough to get something to eat.
Yeah. I would encourage you to read, there's a section of there's a book, I've recommended it many times called Studying the Torah by Avigdor Bonchek. And he has a section in that book where he deals with this particular portion. And I will just leave that reading up to you. Fascinating possibilities there. He comes up with some interesting possibilities for that reading, for that text, for that portion. And I'll cut to the chase, but what he basically argues is that Yaakov actually gave him food ahead of time before he sold him the birthright. So that's his argument. It's an interesting argument based on the verbal structure.
So what's the other thing?
Avigdor, Avigdor, Bonchek, Bonchek.
The name of it is
Studying the Torah. I tell you what, that's a fascinating read. That book right there is gold because he talks about how to interpret the text and he gives you examples all through the Hebrew scriptures of ways of really mining from it gold out of it. I mean, it's just everything about that. Every chapter is premium.
what's the name of it again?
Studying the Torah. All right. Yeah, I try to get everybody that I know to read that book because the chapters in that book are rich and lean and have so much on how to interpret other parts of the scriptures. He gives you insights into other texts and how to really go about. For instance, yes.
Is it possible, wouldn't you think why he was blind? Was he blind because of old age, or was he blind because he was being punished for something that he was saying?
I'm hesitant, I'll say it for me, I'm hesitant to say that a person is being punished if the text doesn't say that they're being punished. Clearly he's old, so I think we can say that the blindness is because of his age, at least on this level. The text doesn't, in my estimation, give us enough to go on to say that he was blind because he's being judged by God or this is some type of punishment. Not to say that it's not, the text isn't explicit in that. So I'm hesitant to go that route without a little more text-based approach. Yeah.
Well, maybe there was a level of spiritual blindness because you'd think that he would have known that if God told his wife who Jacob was really going to be, then he would have thought he would have had a relationship enough with God himself after seeing his father Abraham have that relationship with God, that he would have known. Because then when Esau comes back, he's trembling. He's saying, well then, it's too late for you. Like you would think that he would have had this knowledge.
Yeah.
But maybe there's a spiritual blindness.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I'm not saying it's not the case. It's just that I don't know where to go with that when I'm not sure. So physically blind for sure. And I think it's because of the text is basically saying because of his age, he's advanced in age. But as far as where we go,
Doesn't he say he's going to die soon, but he doesn't?
it doesn't, right? He says I'm going to die, and he ends up living another 20-some years. So that's interesting too. So it's a fascinating text. All right, so now I'm segueing to Malachi. All right. Malachi, the prophet. Most people have only heard about Malachi because of chapter 3. If you go to most churches, Malachi 3 is about the only text you're going to hear from Malachi because it talks about tithing. You know, bring the tithes in the storehouse. You know, so anytime you want to talk about tithing, you go to Malachi 3. However, what happens is Malachi 1 and 2 get left out of the whole equation. Only 3 chapters in Malachi, so I want to kind of give you a little bit of background here. Malachi is, first of all, the name Malachi means messenger, and means my messenger. Although there's a question, anytime you read whether Christian or Jewish sources on this, whether or not we're dealing with a name or we're dealing with a title. Because the Septuagint has his messenger. So it takes it out of the realm of even being the possibility of a name. So maybe it was a name of a person, Malachi, but the word Malachi means my messenger. Okay? So that's the first thing. We're not sure whether it's a proper name or whether it is a title. Okay. Another thing that comes up in this is 20 times in this short book, you have, and here's one of the more really bad translations, 11 times in our portion today, it's Yahweh, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Sevaot. And again, they're translating it, the NIV translates it, Lord Almighty. Really bad translation. Means Adonai of armies. Sevaot armies, it's 20 times in this book. So he's really hammering that whole notion that God has an army behind him. So Malachi really picks up on this, and for him, it's just something he hammers. What does Isaiah hammer home? Isaiah keeps hammering home, he's the Holy One of Israel. He's the Holy One of Israel. That's Isaiah's mantra. And for Malachi, his mantra is, he's Adonai Sevaot. He's the Lord of armies. So when they start repeating over and over again a particular phrase, that's kind of a clue to you that this is something important for them. Okay, so for Isaiah, it's the Holy One of Israel. For Malachi, it's, he's Adonai of armies. He's Yahweh of armies. He has this army behind him. So for him, that's a very important point. Okay, so now look what happens here. He says, an oracle, or you could translate it a burden, the word of the Lord to Israel through Malachi, my messenger. Again, he says, I have loved you, says the Lord, but you ask, how have you loved us? And he says, now here's our connection with our Torah portion. Was not Esau Jacob's brother? The Lord says, yet I have loved Jacob, but Esau I have hated. Okay? And anybody reading this now in English goes, oh, that just seems so wrong. Why would God hate Esau? I mean, because for us, and this goes to culture and to language, we hear love and hate as emotive terms. I love this. I hate that. And for us, it's an emotion. It's not that way in the Near East. And I gave you the handout they sent out, and I think Gary passed some of those out today too. That love and hate have to do with chosenness versus not chosenness, or approve, disapprove, affirm, disaffirm. It has not to do with emotions. This is speaking of God's sovereign choice. In other words, we could say it this way. Esau I have not chosen. Jacob I have chosen. It has nothing to do with what we think of in terms of love and hate. It's how they're being used. Those terms are being used in the ancient Near East. So this is where you have to understand language and culture in order to really get this right, or you're gonna make some errors, because you say, well, he loves this, but he loves Jacob, he hates Esau.
So is the Torah actually using the word that we would typically translate as hate?
Yes.
Or is that, yeah, okay.
Because it's using ahab, love, and sineh, hate. But they're being used in very Semitic ways. So it's not being used in, here's how we know this. In the notes I gave you, I show you how that you have in one of the Gospels, it says, you should hate your father and mother. Okay? You go, what? I hate my father and mother? Then in the corresponding text of Matthew, it says, you should love me more than your father and mother. So it's comparative. It's not always exacting. It's more of a comparative. I hope that you'll love me. That the love you have for me will be such a comparison that it will be hate towards mother and father. It'll be like that.
Yeah, because remember, still say honor your mother and father.
Yeah, honor your mother and father. Yeah, I mean, it's not coming up. So there's this. Here, you have it right here. Let me just use this real quick. So this is. So the example I gave you was in the two examples of apostolic. See, Luke 14:26 says, "Whoever comes to me and does not hate his father and mother." What? I gotta hate my father and mother? Then Matthew 10:37 says, "Whoever loves father and mother more than me." Okay, this is why you have to read the text canonically, because it's using it in a Semitic way. So love and hate have nothing to do with what we think of in terms of emotion, but with the idea of chosenness versus not chosen. So I can say it this way: Esau I have not chosen, but Jacob I have chosen. Or I have loved, I have not loved, or hated. Okay, so the way these words are being used, and this connects it up with our apostolic text. Now, when was Malachi written? That's another whole thing. When was Malachi written? I think Malachi is written somewhere in the mid-450s, thereabouts. He seems to be contemporary with Ezra and Nehemiah. Go with me to Ezra chapter 7. Ezra chapter 7. I love Ezra, by the way. He's a great guy.
No bias either.
Look at Ezra chapter 7, verse 10. Look at this. Ezra 7:10 says this: "For Ezra had devoted himself," now he's a priest, Ezra's a Kohanim, "had devoted himself to the study and observance of the Torah of the Lord, and to teaching its decrees and laws in Israel." So, study, observance, teaching. You study to do, to teach. You don't study to teach, you study to do. In Hebraic thinking. It's not about, and study is in the minds of the sages, the highest form of worship. When you study, you study to do. Teaching is the byproduct. Notice what it says about him in verse 17, verse 12. Artaxerxes, the king of kings, to Ezra the priest, a teacher of the Torah of the God of heaven. Isn't that cool? And then look at verse 25. He says, "And you, Ezra," same chapter, "and you, Ezra, in accordance with the wisdom of your God, which you possess, appoint magistrates and judges to administer justice to all the people of Trans-Euphrates, all who know the Torah of your God, and you are to teach any who do not know them. Whoever does not obey the Torah of your God and the Torah of the king must surely be punished by death, banishment, and confiscation of property, or imprisonment." So Ezra is supposed to be a teacher of the Torah. And I say that because Ezra and Nehemiah are contemporaries. And they were initially, we believe, Ezra and Nehemiah were one book. Okay, in our text, they're separated. But initially, they were in one scroll. And what's interesting is, Malachi and the teaching of Nehemiah parallel each other. Very much. So it's interesting that they have the same themes. I'll give them to you here in just a moment here. First of all, in Malachi, in our text, the issue is priestly, the priest. Look at what he says in verse 6. He says, "A son honors his father and a servant his master. If I am a father, where is the honor due me? If I am a master, where is the respect due me, says the Lord? It is you, O priest, who show contempt for my name." Okay, the Kohanim, the priests. And then he says, he goes on in this to talk about why there's a problem, why the priests are a problem. We'll talk about that in a moment. So Well, let's do that. He says this in verse 7. You placed defiled food on my altar. But you ask, how have we defiled you? By saying that the Lord's table, that is the altar, is contemptible. When you bring blind animals for sacrifice, is that not wrong? When you sacrifice crippled or diseased animals, is that not wrong? Try offering them to your governor. Would he be pleased with you? Would he accept you? Says Adonai Tzila'ot. No. And then if you skip down to verse 13, he says, when you bring injured, crippled, or diseased animals and offer them as a sacrifice, should I accept them from your hand? So what's happening here? The priests are accepting sacrifices that are, they got blemishes, we got broken bones, and the Torah was clear. The people cannot bring just any animal. You can't just say, well, you know what, this animal's got a broken bone, it's got all kinds of problems, we'll give that to the Lord. That'll be my sacrifice.
I'm not gonna
Yeah,
eat
that's
this.
I'm not going to eat this thing.
It's not much of a sacrifice.
It's not much of a sacrifice if it's something you wouldn't even mess with. So I'll give it to the Lord. And the priests are accepting this as a sacrifice. So the priests are the ones who are supposed to be educating the people. This is my issue with rabbinic Judaism. Because if you listen to the Torah says the ones who are to educate the people in the ways of God, in the Torah of God, are the Levites, the Kohanim. Over time, they abdicated their roles, and what filled the vacuum was the rabbis. And then we come up with all kinds of things. Now all kinds of things come into play. Things that not even in the biblical text. And we have things passed off for truth that were never mentioned once in the scriptures. Under the guise of Judaism. And it's like, nowhere in the biblical text do you have any warrant for that. But the Levites were the ones who were supposed to be educating the people. We've gotten so far away from that it's not even funny. Questions, comments?
Kind of like playing poker.
Yes. No.
When I was reading this, I was thinking about our own country. Now, a lot of the prophecies are about Israel,
Yes.
primarily. But at the same time, as I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking about our own country, and I'm looking at our political process as of recent, and we elected this guy who has made all these promises, but he basically said, I'm going to do yada, yada, yada. I want to rebuild. I want to make it strong. I'm going to, basically leaving out God. And I'm wondering how much of this, because there's a lot of us, and I'll include myself, that thinks our country's under judgment because of what we've done as far as removing God from our schools, from our courthouses, from our government. We've propagated abortion and all those things that are just horrendous before our Father. Could this also apply to us? This, because we were founded on Judeo-Christian principles, and if we're sliding away from that, would this also apply to us? Because it's very clear. Yeah, you can say you're going to build up, but I will tear you down.
Mm-hmm.
If you're being judged, I will do it no matter what you do.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think that I'm hesitant to apply this kind of stuff to, like you said, because this is definitely to Israel. That's not to say that God doesn't bring judgment for going against his word, because there's some things that are universal. So clearly, you have, let's go universal. One of the things you mentioned, because we mentioned in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not murder.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have been murdering babies by the left and right. I mean, by the droves, by the millions.
Tens of thousands in this country alone.
Millions. And so, will we stand in judgment when he says, thou shalt not murder? I think that's universal. So on the universals, absolutely. On the universals, we will be judged. I've said before too, I think, if he, I'm being tongue in cheek when I say this, but, God's going to have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah if he doesn't judge us.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think in many ways we're much worse than Sodom and Gomorrah was. I'll give you an example of this. So So this is my own angst. So there's a company. Well, so I have to preface this by saying I lived in Oregon for 5 years, and there's bumper stickers in Oregon that say "Keep Oregon Weird." My response to that is mission accomplished. So there's a company in Oregon. They send me online stuff, and they send me stuff in the mail. We mail ordered stuff from them. And recently, the company has come out and made a statement, both in their printed material and in their email, that they are, supporting LGBT. So they're basically going after anybody who doesn't agree with them on that issue in there and saying, we as a business support this. They really don't have a category. I don't think they have a category for me, because I don't support LGBT, but I don't hate either. So I don't have any hate. I want to make that clear. I don't have any hate for anybody that's in the LGBT community. None. You're not outside the scope of God's love and compassion. And do I agree with the lifestyle? No. But do I hate the person? Absolutely not. So they want to put me in a box and say, well, if you disagree with this morally, well, then you're a hater or you're a homophobe. So I wrote an article a number of years back basically saying, I wish you could stop labeling people phobic if they disagree with you. Anybody that disagrees with you isn't phobic. I'll hug every one of them. I'm not afraid of any one of them. I have nothing to fear. Most they can do is kill the body. So most anybody can take from me.
Yeah, but that's just a political way to turn aggressive outward.
I agree. So my point is that we can hate sin and love sinners. And we should do that. We should hate sin because sin brings about death and separation from God without having any hate for the individuals involved. None whatsoever. We should have absolute compassion and love for people, even if we see them going in paths that are not righteous. So, my point is that I want to send a letter to this company to say, look, you know what? I'm in the third category. I know you have people that support you. I know you have people that hate you. I'm in this middle category that I don't agree with you on the morality, but I don't hate you. In fact, I will defend your rights to be whatever you want to be. I'll defend your human rights and your civil rights to be whatever you want to be. I'll go to bat for your civil rights and your human rights. My father served in the military. I've served in the military. I'll go to bat for your rights to be whatever you want to be. But that doesn't mean I have to agree with it on a moral level. Many of our soldiers have gone and served men and women valiantly across the globe. And they have preserved freedoms for everybody to be whatever they want to be. But that doesn't mean I have to agree with it morally, that what you're doing is right. So, many issues I think God will judge us for, because they're universals. Just things he said, that there is a right and there is a wrong. And he doesn't change. In fact, Malachi, he says he doesn't change. That's one of the things he says. I don't change. There are things that God does not like, because he knows that they are destructive. So, for instance, here's an example. Two things. This is Nehemiah, pairing Nehemiah up with Malachi. He's talking about the priests and how. Look at Nehemiah chapter 13. Read Nehemiah chapter 13. I'll just leave it up to that because I've got to go here. But Nehemiah chapter 13, he says he doesn't like intermarriage with foreign women. Why? Because it brings in idolatry. Malachi is going to address that. Doesn't like the neglect of giving, because the giving that is done to the temple supports the poor and the needy. So there's many things that on a universal level, to answer your question, and on a universal level, I think God will bring judgment, because they're clearly marked out and clearly laid out as things that God abhors. And he says there is a right and there is a wrong. And that's not politically correct to say today, because it's politically correct to say everybody's right. What's right for you is right for you, and everything's right.
It's a very
There's just no wrong. We're all right. You're right. I'm right. He's right. It doesn't matter. Whatever is right for you is what's right. And I'm saying, no, there's an objective text from the living God that says there is a right and there is a wrong. There is a path of righteousness and a path of unrighteousness. And there is absolutes. Yeah.
Do you think that part of that judgment we see in Revelation where he's talking about, a third of the earth is destroyed and blood is high as the
Horse
riding
bridle.
on a horse. And I mean,
Yeah, I don't know.
some of those are soldiers and then,
Yeah, I don't know.
But when you see those global bowl judgments, I mean, those are big time.
Yeah, they're huge. And so I have to look at this and go, I don't think we can be surprised when God brings judgment. Because there has been so many people for so many years shaking their fist in the face of God and saying, I'll do what I want to do, the way I want to do it. I'll live my life the way I want to live my life. And here's the point. So let me come back. So this is two things. Going back to our Matthew text, or Luke text, the good news is God reigns. The bad news is God reigns. It depends on what side of the aisle you're on. For some people, the day of the Lord will be a great day. For other people, the day of the Lord will be a day of judgment. And let's not forget, he says, oh, by the way, I've got an army behind me. So I can impose my will. And in a sense, I chose Jacob, and I did not choose Esau. And I made this choice long before anybody was born. So that it wasn't about, so that if they'd have been born, people would have said, well, it was about the fact that one of them was a nice guy, one of them wasn't a nice guy. Well, yeah, it had nothing to do with how they looked or how they acted or anything like that. It was simply, before they were born, I made a choice. And we don't like that because, well, what about my free will? And God says, look, I never let your free will get in the way of my sovereignty. I sovereignly do everything and accomplish everything that I want to do, whether using your free will to accomplish what I want to do. And like I've said before, the most incredible example of God's sovereignty and our free will is the crucifixion. And the irony was, he was saving us while we were destroying him. But that was part of the plan, because he knew us. He knew that if he sent one who was righteous amongst us, that he would be so righteous that we would just say, he's got to go. We got to kill him. Yes.
All that we read from Genesis 1:1 to Revelation 22:21 is written to us, his children. The natural man cannot receive the things of God. Only the spiritual man can. So these are not universal precepts as far as the world is concerned. They are dealing with us, his children. He's warning us. Get out of Babylon. Get out of this world. Because the judgment is coming.
Yeah, we must.
That's just what Jeremiah.
Yeah, we must occupy.
Jeremiah spent all this time. And the same thing is today as we have in Jeremiah. Oh, everything's fine. Don't worry about it.
Right. Peace, peace. It's all good. It's all good. Peace, peace.
All roads lead to heaven.
Yeah, everybody's fine. Everybody's going to make it. We're all going to be fine.
God's all in his hands.
And we're all going to join hands and sing Kumbaya. Well, yeah. Look. Yeah, I have had in this movement before people who have said to me, this universalism when it comes to salvation, when it comes to the will of God. And they've said, well, every path leads to God, to the same God. So they're just calling him a different name, but it's kind of the same path.
Really?
And my response to that is, ba-lo-ni. That's the Hebrew word for it. Every path doesn't lead to him.
Most paths lead to destruction.
There are paths that, I'm sorry, but if you say to me, people say, well, I'm worshiping this God or that God. Well, no, that isn't the path. There's only one. There's only one path. It's narrow, and not everybody is going to be on that path.
Yeshua even said, few.
Right. Yeah. Matthew 7:21-23. Many will come to me in that day and say, Lord, Lord, did we not do this in your name and that in your name? He will say, I never knew you. We never had a covenant relationship. We were never in covenant relationship. Remember this. Just because one professes to have faith doesn't mean that one possesses faith. Many will say to me, but the truth is this. Do you have abiding faith? Are you in Christ? If you're not in Messiah, then you have no place in the world to come. But if you are in Messiah, you are in him, and because he is who he is, you have what you have. To God be the glory. All right, we got to go. Page 95. Join with me, stand with me for the traditional.